Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
Good evening, everybody, and for one last time here in 2023, welcome back to the S1 Racing GT3 Sprint Series, coming to you live tonight here on Apex Racing TV. Quickly, before we get into the broadcast, we'd like to apologize for the slight delay here. There's a little bit of a technical issue with the session, so we're running a little bit late here, but thankfully we are here now and ready to rock and roll. My name is Ron Mons. Alongside me in the virtual commentary booth is Charles Bichelle, and in the virtual production hall we have our old buddy Josh Wilkie working all the cameras. And now, after a quick little break for the holidays, we're back and ready to close off 2023 in style with the same racing action we've come to expect from this series. Tonight we're racing at a track which is very historic in the world of motorsports, but often maligned with its modern layout, the Hockenheim ring. A venue with a lot of history, but still a layout which has only been around for about 21 years. This track has been well known for the massive changes that were done to it in the early 2000s, but this track has still put on some fantastic racing. Definitely those Formula One races in 2018 and 2019 spring to mind. Now, this track is a little bit of an unknown quantity with the series. We didn't see it on last season's calendar, so I'll pass this off to my colleague here, Charles. What do you expect to see from the racing action tonight?
Well, Ron, thanks for having me in. Yeah, I love Hockenheim. It's really a great track. So if we're going to compare it to last race at CTMP, not as technical a track, a lot more straight lines. There is a couple of technical sections, especially in the in what they call the arena section on the back half of the circuit, basically the third sector of the track. So the real trouble spots for this is turn one, especially lap one. We talk about it week in, week out with cold tires. There'll probably be a short pace lap, so you won't have time to get the tires warmed up. And then turn one has a gigantic curb on the inside, and you have to be pretty perfect to get that corner right. You take too much of that curb, and we may see another flying Porsche here tonight. But if you miss the apex, then you're off. There's plenty of runoff out there, but there's a slowdown involved with that, taking that off track to the outside of turn one. And then the other trouble spot is the hairpin. It's just, you get such a good run, especially if you're early and you're still kind of bunched up. You get a really good run down that straightaway. It's probably the best place to get a good draft off the car in front. And you get the overspeed, and then you say, I'm going to make a move to the inside, and you just find out there's really not a lot of room down there to operate. You end up missing your braking points more often than not, and so that's the other trouble spot. But I think, as we like to say, with a smaller grid, If we space everything out pretty early, then it should be a pretty trouble-free race. No, shouldn't have any real big incidents. You still may see some door banging here and there, but I'm looking forward to a nice clean race, and we'll see who comes out on top tonight.
We've got 45 minutes ahead of us, and I think the point you mentioned there, I think we're definitely going to see some trading paints, especially on lap 1. I think turn 1, the corner that you mentioned, is probably going to be the most important, because with this series, there is a 20-point incident limit. After the drivers hit that, they will incur a penalty, and that track and that corner is probably the biggest on this track to pick up those incident points. You have such a razor's thin margin of error. You can just, if you clip the curb on the inside just a little bit, you're really going to have a rough ride going through that runoff area, which is going to collect some dust on your tires. So you're going to be in for a world of hurt when you come into the next corner. So we're currently in qualifying, about to wrap it up here, and Gregory Hoveson, who's just been the man on fire with this series all year long, he is currently on your provisional pole. We'll see if anything can change. Justin Hall currently in P2, and Simon Adrill, the series founder, currently in P3. That's an amazing run from him. We're following Justin Barrera there for the last lap, and he managed to get a pretty good lap there, and Hoveson actually improves on his time to go to 1:38.3. So Gregory Hoveson really staking his claim on the pole here tonight. The checkered flag has come out in this qualifying session, so we're going to wait for some of these drivers to complete their qualifying laps, but yet again, it's looking fantastic for Gregory Hoveson. He was your Series 2 champion and kicked off here with Season 3 with he kicked it off in really the best fashion you could. He grabbed the pole, led for a vast majority of the race, and took the checkered flag to win at the season opener 2 weeks ago, and looks like he's going to try and repeat that performance here tonight. He's pretty much been undefeated from this series. He's won 6 of the 7 races that we've broadcasted here on Apex, so he looks to continue that streak here tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. He looks to be the front runner, and it's not unexpected. But I noticed that his partner in crime is not with him tonight, who finished second in the last race, and his name escapes me now that I'm trying to recall it. but so it's going to be a really good battle for those other 2 podium spots. So we'll see. It's like I said, we've got a good midfield, a mid-pack group here, very tight as far as ratings concerned, very tight as far as lap times. So with a chance to get a P2 out of this race and get some really good points, it should be a fantastic battle. Is what I'm looking for. I'm just kind of watching the practice, and you'll see the off tracks will be aplenty. It wouldn't surprise me to see a couple cars go through and have to take the drive-through penalty for too many incidents.
The driver in question there was Kyle Domark, and he is Gregory Hoveson's teammate, and he is not here tonight. So I think that battle for the podium is certainly going to be open. Justin Hull, who has finished this session in P2, he was a driver that finished P3 2 weeks ago, so it's looking like he'll try and sneak his way onto the podium yet again. We'll see if there's any sort of chaos towards the end of the race like we had 2 weeks ago, Canadian Tire. That was really a hectic finish to the race, so we'll just see what happens in the next 45 minutes or so. We're going to get the starting grid here in the not-too-distant future, but once again, it's going to be Gregory Hoveson grabbing a pole position in not really dominant fashion. It's still a pretty wide gap. It's about 0.3 of a second between him and Justin Hull rounding out your front row, but it's still it's a performance that you come to expect from Gregory Hoveson. He's just been pretty much flawless, and the only reason why he hasn't gone 7 for 7 on these broadcasts is because of a little bit of team orders that came into play at the season finale last season at Watkins Glen, where he let his teammate Kyle Domark sneak the victory and also P2 in the championship. But other than that, he really hasn't put a foot wrong all season and all series long. So I believe we'll get the other starting grid here soon. Qualifying has wrapped up, and all the times are on the board. And here we go. Here's the starting grid for tonight's race. It's Delta Sport driver Gregory Hoveson in the familiar spot P1, then Justin Hall rounding out your front row in P2. Simon Atwell putting in a great result to start tonight's race in P3, about 0.4 of a second behind Gregory Hoveson's pole time, and that's a little bit farther back time-wise to go to Sammy Hendricks in 4th. Justin Dive Bomber Barrera will round off in 5th. He'll round off your top 5 in the number 419 car. Then Bradley Alvis will start this race in 6th, about 0.7 of a second behind your pole sitter Spencer Retzman. While the only Ferraris in this race, he will be in 7th with Eric Bilotta rounding out your 4th row in P8. That's Matthew Perrin in 9th. Santinder De Hinza, who I always fear that I'll butcher his pronunciation, he's about 1.5 seconds behind Hoveson. He'll round out your top 10. That's Chris Casano, Wesley Griffith rounding out your 6th row, and then Shane Brown will be your last place starter. A little bit of a smaller grid, which you can't really blame the drivers. It's only 2 days after Christmas, so a lot of these drivers are spending time with their families, but the drivers that are here tonight are spending their time, spending their evening in their race cars.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the holidays, the racing sometimes that takes a backseat, especially if you have to do traveling. So, yeah, but it's good. 13 car grid. Like I said, that may make things a little easier as far as any major conflicts on the track. But I'm sure there'll be still plenty of good racing to be watching this time.
My thoughts exactly. This series never fails to disappoint when it comes to the action, and there's still a lot to come into play, even though there's only 13 cars that'll be on track here tonight, as the drivers are going to be moving their way to take the green flag here, and you can see them going through and about to enter the stadium section here, but there's still a lot to play for in these races, where after tonight's race we'll be officially a third of the way through the season. Only 6 races we run every other Wednesday night here with this season, and I think there's just so much to play. I think Gregory Hovison has to be your favorite coming into the race, but there's pit stops to contend with. There's just so much that can really ruin your chances, and there's a lot that can happen. We've seen incidents. Certainly last week, the end of the race was just absolute carnage with drivers wrecking into each other, so we'll see if we have any more chaos here. Maybe with the smaller field, it might be a little bit clean. The drivers are rounding their way around the final corner, and Gregory Hovison is going to be the one leading the field to green here. He's stepped on it already, and the green flag is out here for race 2 of season 3 here, as Gregory Hovison getting a fantastic start, clearing his way, moving to the outside and going through turn 1 cleanly, eating that outside curb, as all these drivers will be. But I believe so far it's so clean with all these drivers are taking a little bit easy right now, but you can see some racing farther behind. You can see Simon Attrill and Justin Hall are starting to battle. Meanwhile, there's other drivers going side by side farther in the back, but so far it's so clean. Knowing my luck, I probably just jinxed it.
Yeah, it was good start. Everybody made it through turn 1, and now we're coming down to the hairpin. You can see that 4-car pack that's right there behind Hovison, and they're already going 2 wide, so everybody's already starting to look for a dive to the inside.
We'll see a little bit of a dive bomb there from the 007 car. Ooh, that's very close, and you can see the 97 going a little bit wide there, getting stuck on the sausage curb on the outside. That is a very deadly curb. We've seen that affect drivers in the past. I remember last season on the ARL GT3 trophy that we cover here on Apex Racing TV. I saw plenty of drivers whack that curb, get beached on, and then spin their way into the outside wall. So I think all of these drivers will have to be careful of hitting those curbs, especially ones with the evil sausages on the outside. That affected one of the drivers there. You can see some wig-wagging action there as those drivers eat up those 1X for going off track like it's lunch. So right now, so far, so clean with all these drivers. Saw a little bit of gravel action there coming into the stadium, but right now it's been a fantastic start for Gregory Hovison as he's pulled out a pretty big lead here, and we haven't even ended the first lap.
Yeah, he's off to a great start, but like I said, we'll have to watch because it only takes one mistake. As you were saying, those curbs will ruin your race. But yeah, that was Hall that was coming into the arena section, got that outside sausage curb, and just basically it's a 1X once you jump that curb. And then you saw Attrill wide exit into the arena section. You're in that gravel. Luckily, with the changes to the off-track dynamics, maybe not as big a problem, but I have seen cars just completely lose it, come across the track, and take out many others behind them.
One driver that did not have a good start was Eric Bialotta, who actually spun towards the end of the lap. You can see he's now about 15 seconds back of the rest of the pack, so he had a spin that we just barely caught in the background. I'm not sure if we'd be able to get a replay here in the not-too-distant future as this action starts to cool off up towards the front. I believe we might get a replay to see what in the world happened to Eric Bialotta. You can see him well farther down the pack with some flat spot tires. After that spin, he's going to really struggle between now and the first series of pit stops. We're going to take a look at the replay here to see what happened. I believe there's some action here actually going into the hairpin. This is the other dive that we saw from the driver of the 007. That's Matthew Pern going for a move down the inside. You can see Bialotta having that off there, picked up the other 1X, ran a little bit wide. A very easy corner to make a mistake on, because with the massive asphalt runoff area, it messes with your depth perception. And you're like, okay, I can go into this corner really deep, and that ends in absolute heartbreak. So now, just a few corners later, it ended in absolute tears for Eric Bialotta. He was running in good positions, firmly in the top 10, but yeah, just hit that curb a little bit, picked up the throttle a little bit too early, and sadly for Eric Bialotta, his race goes south very early on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, those outside curbs, you have to be very careful. Some of the cars, obviously these cars are different. which is why these I think the drivers will switch from time to time during the season. But you know, the Ferrari is usually fairly decent on curbs, but these curves, for whatever reason, it's the outside curbs. I think there was some negative camber in there as well, so maybe that was the other factor that caused him to lose the rear end and just kind of spun the car. And he's managed to collect it, didn't collect anybody else. He's back on the track, and so now it's just a matter of hot lapping until you get into your pit stop cycle.
I will say one thing, these Ferraris, ever since they were introduced last season, they haven't really responded too well to the curbs. We saw it a lot during the closing stages of, I believe it was season 9 of the ARL prototype championship, and that was actually, no, that's a series coming up here on Apex Racing TV. I got my notes crossed up. The ARL GT3 trophy, that was absolute chaos when the Ferraris were introduced, because they were hitting those curbs and just spinning left, right, and center. And we saw that last season where a lot of these drivers were switching to that Ferrari, and they also got bit quite a lot. We saw plenty of DNFs and plenty of crashes with those Ferraris last season. I think the new kind of version of that, the new GT3 car with this season, is the Audi, and a lot of drivers you can see on the left-hand side of your screen, a lot of them are running that new Audi. You can see the drivers currently running in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th running in the Audi. Then you can see farther behind Pern in 8th running in the Audi, and then Castano and Griffith and P10 and P11, all of them are running the Audi right now. So it's a little bit of a popular car. We kind of touched on this last week's broadcast with the pros and cons of the new Audi, and we can see Simon Attrell actually dropping off. I think he picked up a slowdown there, so a little bit of tussling there forced him off the road, and sadly for Simon Attrell, actually set the fastest lap a few laps ago before Gregory Hovesen took command of that. He was running a fantastic position, but sadly for him, that slowdown is going to drop him all the way down to 9th. That is a real kick in the balls.
It is, and he's still running slow. I don't know if he's maybe got problems with the car or not. Maybe he's got a well, he's back in the racing line now. I wonder if he had maybe a technical issue that he had to deal with during that, because that seemed like that slowdown took a very long. No, he's still having problems.
I think maybe a shifter issue.
I was about to say, does it look like he couldn't get out of 2nd and shift up to 3rd?
Yeah, I think he was, I mean, he hit the red line for sure, and then just got off the gas and went off the line. So I can imagine something absolutely disastrous and heartbreaking has happened to Simon Attrell. You can see now he's 20 seconds behind. So we thought it was a slowdown, which is easy to pick coming through the final series of corners. We're following him now. You can see on the dash there in 1st, going into 2nd. Going into 3rd. Okay, so maybe it was just like a ridiculously long slowdown. I'm not really sure what happened. What I might do is I might take a look, because Simon streams his races on the S1 Races YouTube channel. If you'd like to check that out after these broadcasts here on Apex, you can certainly do that just by looking up S1 Races here on YouTube. But I'll have to take a look to see what in the world happened, whether he picked up just a ridiculously long slowdown or whether he had some kind of technical issues. He's still going very slowly, so something weird is going on right now at the series founder.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I just haven't seen a slowdown that took that long to clear. Because it's not like he was, you know, basically lifting and coasting, trying to just burn it a tenth or two at a time. He was well off the pace. So I'm not sure what kind of slowdown he would have gotten to get it to a point to where he had to slow down for essentially a quarter of the track in order to clear it. So that's interesting. I think I'd kind of lean hardware malfunction, but you know, maybe we'll find out after the race, and we'll get a notification and see what that was, and we might can follow up. But yeah, it's you know, so far it's, like I said, it's been a pretty clean race. We had just a couple of little issues with Attrell, we just mentioned, and Bellata with his spin, but everything else has been pretty clean so far.
Taking a look at Simon's live stream, and I can see that coming out of the final corner, he was stuck in 2nd gear until he got to the back straightaway. I'm just looking now. He's entered the back straightaway now. From my perspective, obviously quite delayed just to see what in the world happened to him. But yeah, it's just hardware failures for him. So it's it's such a shame for him, but it's part of racing. It's part of sim racing, where a little bit of a technical issue can catch you out badly. He's running at a firm pace right now and slowly catching up to Brown up ahead. So I think he's definitely got the vinegar in him to try and close up that gap and trying to salvage something out of this race. There's still plenty to play for here. We're only 8 minutes in to this 45-minute race, so there's still a lot that these drivers can do, and I'm sure Simon, if he plays his cards right and there's a little bit of chaos farther ahead, I think he could very easily break into the top 10 by the time the checkered flag comes out.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. He had a really good pace. He was up front. I think running P2 or P3 since the beginning of the race. So he's definitely got the pace to make up time from the back. And obviously, we're already about 9 minutes into a 45-minute race. So he's limited on how much he's going to be able to make up. But he obviously, like I said, he's got really good pace. And there will still be mistakes. I think I saw one in kind of the background of that shot. Maybe caught some inside curb and kind of tripped it up a bit. So as we see him coming down to the inside to make the pass over Brown. So nicely done. Out of turn 2. Heading down the straight to the hairpin.
Job well done for him. It was a fairly textbook move to move into P12, but he still has a lot to claw back if he wants to move it into that P10 spot. You can see Griffith right now is 14.4 seconds behind Gregory Hoverson. You can see Atwell's at 22 seconds behind, so he still has a pretty big gap to close there, but I'm sure the series admin, he's probably done lots. He runs a little bit wide there, coming out of the hairpin, picking up those 1Xs. I think the pressure is starting to apply to him a little bit. I can imagine he's a little bit upset after that technical issue that he had. I didn't have the volume on to see if he said any expletive words that I can't say on the other Apex broadcast here, but I can imagine he was a little bit upset after that. I can't really blame the guy because he was putting together a fantastic race, but all that chaos has actually given Sammy Hendricks P2, so he managed to claw back and get past Hall. So we're going to take a look at a replay to see Sammy Hendricks pulling off a move here, see where he got this done here. I believe it might be coming into turn 2 here, if I'm not mistaken, and this is going to be, this might be a little bit of a technical issue on my end. I can't see it.
Yeah, it's okay. Nope, coming down the hairpin. Yep, Chase takes the inside. It's a pretty nice, clean move. So yeah, it was nice and well done. He was trying to fight back, but no such luck. And Hendricks holds on to the spot, hold on to P2, overhaul.
Well, after that technical issue from my end where I didn't get to see that smooth move from Sammy Hendricks, I think I have to slap the person that sets up my computer. So I'll slap myself real quick here on this broadcast. All right, we're good. So actually woke me up a little bit here. It's about 9:30 here on the East Coast, so it's a little bit late for me. So it's a pretty good race for the final few podium spots, but up towards the front, Gregory Hoverson has put together a commanding race so far. You can see the gap is about 0.47 of a second right now, so he's slowly pulling that gap, and it's he's having a little bit of a Christmas cruise, you could say. He's like driving like he's trying to see some family members here. So I think I don't know, maybe we could have a quick little discussion about Christmas driving, because I had a very good story of trying to get to my family's house on Christmas. I live on the East Coast here in the city of Philadelphia, which is synonymous for the time that comedian Bill Burr ripped this city to shreds. But I was driving through the major highway in this city, and we had to negotiate the drivers on I-95 trying to get to the Philadelphia Eagles football game. And there was this guy barreling through the highway going about 140 miles an hour in a Dodge Charger. So I think Gregory Hoverson is actually going a little bit slower than that guy on I-95. Maybe there could be some lessons learned between the two of them. I'm not sure if I could get Gregory Hoverson in contact with that random guy driving a probably uninsured Dodge Charger going down I-95, but who knows? I think Gregory Hoverson could learn some lessons from the guy.
I mean, maybe, but let's be fair. The Dodge Charger hasn't been homologated to a GT3 spec, and iRacing hasn't BOP'd it, so he has a little bit of an advantage. Yeah, it's mine was pretty straightforward, to be honest. I think we actually kind of did our Christmas a little early, so we didn't actually get together Christmas Eve, Christmas Day. We did it the weekend before, and nice and smooth. It was just nice and easy. And I live in Birmingham, Alabama, but all my family are still fairly rural, so it's just a nice drive in the country for me.
You get to see the good views there down the country. Here in Philadelphia, the only views you can really get are views that I can't really discuss here on Apex, because it's not pretty. I'll just say that Philadelphia, I believe, is the only city in America that was ever used in a anti-drug PSA in another country. So I'll just leave it at that. But it's very different experiences that the both of us had on Christmas. The cruises that we had is a little bit different, I think.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I wouldn't trade you for the world.
Yeah, that I can't really blame you. I would love to see the countryside, and I doubt you would ever want to see the city of Philadelphia, even the nice parts. So I think the point you mentioned there last lap of the Dodge Charger not being homologated for GT3 specs, I gotta wonder if the extremely dark tinted windows would affect the BOP. I'm not sure if that would affect some kind of weight or be against some sort of like international motorsports regulations. But I think, I mean, that would probably be some kind of safety hazard or some kind of safety violation. And I think it would add a little bit of weight. So I don't think that car would be the most competitive in the world. But if that guy could get 140 miles an hour out of a Dodge Charger on a crowded road full of a bunch of football fans trying to get to a game, I can imagine he would do wonders in a GT3 car, or he'd probably end up going into the barrier and crashing our game with the amount of parts that are flying off it.
Yo, absolutely, absolutely. I have no doubt about that.
That would actually be interesting. I'd pay money to see that. Meanwhile, we've got Chris Cassano. He looked like he was going to try and get a move there onto Hinza going into the hairpin. He just sneaked a wheel down the inside. It was going to be a very bold move if he tried to get it done, but just a little bit too late there. De Hinza choked up a little bit coming through the midsection of the corner, but thankfully for him, he held on to it. So those drivers are running right towards the tail end of the top 10. De Hinza in 8th, Cassano in 9th. So right now it's a fairly spread out field. All things considered, Hoverson still leading by about 4.8 seconds. He's slowly extending that gap and setting some pretty good laps. I'll check my live timing screen right now. I believe he's still, if I'm not mistaken, yes, he still has the fastest lap of the race by a pretty comfortable margin too, a 138.7. So that's pretty quick, but we've seen Gregory Hoverson do this in the past. Thank you, Josh, for putting up the other fastest lap graphic there. But we've seen Gregory Hoverson do this in the past. When the pit stops come, that man turns his car into overdrive. He just drives it like he's stolen, essentially. So he really gets the most out of that car right before the pit stops. I think we might see that coming up here in about, well, I'll say probably about 15 to 10 minutes. I think 10 to 15 minutes will probably be when we start to see all of the drivers come in. We might see some stragglers farther down. Maybe we'll see Simon Attrell try and pull off a unique strategy and come in a little bit early, but you can see him there. He's at 139.1 at the early stage of this race. So Simon, you gotta feel so bad for the guy, because we kind of joked about it last season and we kind of joked about it a little bit in the broadcast 2 weeks ago. But that man, whenever he's putting together a good drive, bless his heart, it seems like he always gets hit by a falling anvil. So unfortunately tonight, it seems like the misfortune has struck him yet again.
Yeah, it's what it seems like. I we were, talking about that earlier, and we've compared this to real racing. These virtual racers have, equipment problems, internet issues, graphics drivers updating in mid-race. So there's all these plethora of issues these guys have, and it's kind of really synonymous with real-time racing. You can't know how many races were lost because a two-auto part failed in the car. And it's, so if, to add insult to injury, if Simon would have had a technical malfunction and had to park the car and get out of the race, that's one thing. For it to happen for about a half a lap and cost him 20 seconds on track, that's got to be frustrating.
Yeah, at that point, with how long the technical issue developed, I mean, you can just see him trying to slam that shift up pedal in just sheer frustration. You can imagine the blood was boiling for him right now. And I believe we're going to get a replay here to see some more action that's been going on as we were talking about Christmas cruising and a whole bunch of other stuff that went on during the other Christmas break here. This is Eric Bialotta trying to get a move done here on the Audi up ahead of him. That is, if I'm not mistaken, that is the 067 car there going into the very tight left-hander, and that's a very easy corner to make a mistake with that massive sausage curb on the inside. But Bialotta manages to get the move done fairly smooth, and he's slowly but surely making his way up through the field right now. He's broken into the top 10, but I think Simon Attrell might be knocking on his door in a little bit. The gap between those two is less than 2 seconds currently, so I think those two might close up here in a few moments' time.
Yeah, I think so. I think Attrell's got a really good pace, but Bialotta's doing a good job. Had that early spin, and is just kind of working his way back. And I think both of these cars will be fighting for that top 10 positions before the end of the race. Like they both got really good pace. I was watching Hoverson earlier in the race, and he's basically just backed off. He put himself about a 5-second gap, and his lap times were consistently about 3 or 4 hundredths of a second off of each other from lap after lap. And it was really close to the fast lap of the race. So I think he's just said, okay, you know what? I've got my gap. Now I can just kind of fuel save and tire save, get myself ready for my pit stop. He'll do the he'll do the hammer time in lap and then the hammer time out lap, and like I said, barring anything disastrous, should probably get an easy win here tonight. But still got guys that are fighting, and Hendricks and Hall are doing a really good job. They're trying to at least keep it close if they can. As Hovison kind of backs off, they're trying to push and see if they can tighten that gap back up.
Yeah, I think Hovison at this rate, he has such a large gap. I mean, 5.3 seconds isn't the largest gap in the world. There's certainly been bigger at this track when Formula One was racing here, but it's still a fairly large gap in this series. And it's not like it's going down or fluctuating a lot either. It's just been consistently, but surely it's been growing. Slowly but surely, it's just been ticking up ever so quickly, and you can see it's actually decreasing a little bit. The gap is now 5.2 seconds, still a fairly large gap between the two of them. He might be checking his email at this stage, or he might be pushing a little bit. We're at the 19-minute mark of this race, so I think plenty of things can change. One thing that may affect his race here in a little bit, Brown currently running in P13. He is 58 seconds back of Hovison right now. So with lap times in the 1:30 barriers, I don't think, well, maybe if there's some sort of mistake or just a really shocking turn of pace for Brown, maybe Hovison might have to deal with him before the pit stops. I think he'll definitely have to deal with him between now and the checkered flag. He'll definitely have to worry about at least one lapped car in this race. But I think right now the gap with Hovison, he just has nothing in that front windscreen. He just can see nothing other than just empty asphalt. And as a racing driver, that's always what you want to see. So I think Gregory Hovison is in the spot that he's really made his own in this series. 6 out of 7 wins of these broadcasts here on Apex, and it looks like he's very much on track to try and extend that streak to 7 and 8. Knowing my luck, I probably just jinxed him, which, hey, I don't want to give any ill will to the guy, but I think if we ended up jinxing the guy that's been dominating this series, I don't think it'd be the worst result in the world, because we'd have a lot more to talk about if Gregory Hovison was taken out of the picture. It's kind of like the Formula One people on Twitter that are like, oh, what would Formula One be like if Max Verstappen wasn't racing, and they just focus on the battle with P2. If the battle for P2 right now was a battle for the win, as we see Justin Hall blanking out there, at least on my screen, you can see the drivers from P2 to P4, you can cover them all with a blanket. So Gregory Hovison is just a standout star, pulling away, still within just barely in the camera view, but the battle right behind him is still pretty hot.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of what I was expecting as we started this race. You've got that, you've got some, really, with the Audi there, was that Hendricks? Yeah, Hendricks just, like he caught the inside curb, and he caught it with the rear tire and kind of kicked the rear around a bit. So now he's got, 3 wide into the arena. Oh, that was smart to back out of that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think so. That would have been a very bold move, but it looks like they're nearly going to go 3 wide into the next corner. You can see Barrera trying to get the move done on Hendricks around the outside. He might be able to clear him here. No, just doesn't have the speed. Ooh, yeah, he may manage to clear him, but only just exiting the corner. So Justin Barrera moves into the final podium spot. Hendricks loses 2 spots in the span of about 15 seconds there, so that's a very frustrating series of corners for him. But Justin Barrera, I mean, you can see the name he has. He has a little bit of a reputation for going for some very bold moves, which as a broadcaster is always entertaining to watch. But he just clipped that curb pretty badly there, went into the asphalt runoff, and I think he's very lucky not to have picked up a slowdown from that, because that was a little bit marginal there. But Barrera managing to hold on to P3 for now. I think with this very long back straightaway, we might see Hendricks try and size up a move here coming into the hairpin.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. Like I said, you get these cars this close together and you get that good toe down this long straightaway. So he's obviously definitely looking to see if he can get back inside, but he wisely just says, you know what, I'm going to wait. They kind of got, I think Barrera kind of parked it on the apex there a little bit, and Hendricks had to pull back about a couple of tenths. And so there's a little bit of a gap there now. But yeah, I think Barrera actually was very smart. He could have made that 3 wide, and it would have been probably catastrophic going into that corner. But he wisely kind of backed out. He chose the outside line, and was able to get past Hendricks before the corners were done. You see the replay coming up here. Yep, you can see there with Hendricks losing the rear of the car. Hall taking advantage, coming to the inside, which will be the inside of this next corner. Barrera taking a look, said, maybe not. And he said, which line do I want to pick? And so he says, all right, I'm going to take the outside line here, inside for the Mercedes arena, and then outside through these set of corners, and is able to make that passing. Really great driving.
And that was some clean yet respectful racing from all of them, but they're still driving very, very hard there. That was, if Justin Barrera decided to go for that send there, that would have been brilliant. It probably would have ended an absolute disaster, but that still would have been amazing to watch. Meanwhile, Cassano is actually pulled into the pits. I'm not sure if that's some sort of internet connection issue, or it's just a very early pit stop from the driver in the Audi. But yeah, I believe this might be him running in the pits. He had a very slow last lap, and yes, he is into the pits. A very early stop for the Audi driver, the number 099 car, so he's going to drop down into P12. I don't think he's going to lose out on the position to Brown. We'll see. He's very far back. You can see the gap now is about 1 minute and 5 seconds between him and Hovesen. So I believe Cassano will be exiting out really in a race of his own, ahead of Brown by a wide margin and behind Griffith by a massive margin.
It's just in that bubble now. He's the first of the pitters, but maybe he thinks, as we slotted in there through the hairpin, probably just.
Ooh, Bialotta has not had a good turn of things as of late. We might get a replay to see an incident that he had before this. That's a very frustrating spin because he was so close to the barriers that he couldn't even spin it around. So we're getting a replay here to see. I believe this might be a replay of the crash that he had here before, or is this a replay of the spin? No, it's the incident he had before. Nearly rear ends the Audi up ahead of him, and rejoining the track, he gets beached on that curb and manages to keep it rolling. Thankfully for him, that time around he didn't spin, but unfortunately the next time around it ended in disaster. That could have ended in disaster for the both of them. That was he overshot that corner by a mile, so that was a very close call there for Bialotta.
Yeah, that was a very defensive act to try and not hit the car in front. Like braking points were different for those two cars, and his was later than the car in front, and he said, "Okay, I can't hit him, so let me just take it wide here and avoid him completely." Cost him a couple of seconds on the track, but until that spin, at least he's still able to battle with an undamaged car and can continue on, and that's really the whole name of the game at this point.
We can see some nice tussling here between Justin Hall and Justin Barrera. The Justins are battling quite hard here for the P2 spot. I was thinking that Barrera was maybe going to try and size up a move coming into the hairpin. He might try and size up a move here. No, he stays behind. Barrera right now feeling a little bit conservative. He's not really going for a really audacious move right now. Maybe what he could be seeing is the fact that we're 26 minutes into this race, and these drivers are going to be eyeing up their first and only pit stops of this race in a few moments' time. So I think Barrera is trying to keep his car clean. They do have a fast repair to negotiate with, so if they do pick up any sort of damage in this first stint, they'd be able to come in and repair it. But I think Barrera is just thinking, hey, I need to keep my car clean. I'm in a really good spot right now. If I push hard enough and play my cards right and just sit in the slipstream of the Audi up ahead of me, I'll be able to save a little bit of gas, take a little bit less gas on the encroaching first and only pit stop of this race, and be able to jump him through strategy. So I think that could be why we're seeing Barrera feel a little bit more conservative at this stage. He's not really pushing it as much as we usually expect from him, but knowing my luck, I probably just jinxed it, and he's probably going to go for a move here. Coming into the hairpin soon, it's very close between these two, about a car length, maybe a car length and a half.
Yeah, he's in a good spot. The BMW, if you are going to compare these two cars, the BMW versus the Audi, obviously the Audi being the new car, has always been really good cornering. It's not always the fastest car down the straightaway, but it's always been really good in the twisty parts of the track. The BMW is just one of those front engine, muscle cars. It's the Dodge. I would say it's the Dodge Charger, but that's probably the Mercedes is probably a little bit more powerful. But it just really good straight line speed. Probably doesn't handle as well as the Audi does. But so if he's going to make a move, it's going to be at the end of that straightaway going into the hairpin, and it's just going to be a matter of who can outbrake the other. But right now, I think he's just trying to do his best to just try to keep behind that Audi through this technical section of the track to get back around to the front stretch and then into to that long stretch to the hairpin.
Now, I gotta imagine at this stage we're 28 minutes in, so I think the other drivers will probably be pitting next time by. We'll see. I don't think Hovesen has decided to take the option and pit this time. We'll see if Justin Hall and the drivers running in the final spots of the podium decide to. No, they have not. They're staying out here. So I think these drivers really have to eye up the stop. The gap is slowly decreasing, not between Hovesen and Hall. That's actually increasing. It's now about 5.6 seconds, 5.7 now. But the gap is decreasing between Hovesen and Brown. You can see Brown is now 1 minute and 15, 1 minute and 16 behind Hovesen. So he is slowly going to become involved in this fight. Meanwhile, Pern, Dehinza, and Adderall have come into the pits. So I did mention that they're going to see some pit stops here around the minute 30 mark, and we have seen it now. So I think maybe next time by is when all these drivers up towards the front are going to have to pit. You can see Castano was in the pits for 16 seconds, 0.3. So we'll see if these drivers can get out in timely fashion. You can see Pern, 14.1. That's a fairly quick stop from him. He's going to exit in P8, if I'm not mistaken, unless, yeah, he'll be exiting in P8 of this race. You can see Pern taking a 14.1, Adderall at a 13.5. I believe he's going to jump ahead to Dehinza there to move into 9. So very good strategy call there from Adderall. Saved a little bit of gas. I'm shocked because he spent half a lap on the red line second gear that he managed to save that much fuel to take a shorter stop. Maybe he'll have to save a little bit more gas in the later stages of this race. We'll just have to wait and see. But I think with these drivers pitting farther behind, I think it's not going to be very long until the drivers up towards the front come in as well.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think this is about the limit of the fuel, so they'll be coming in. Obviously Hovesen, for the last few laps hasn't been just max pace. So we'll see if he managed to stay out. Yep, looks like he's got one more lap in him. And so, yeah, Astral's really shorted that last pit stop. So I'm wondering if he's going to have to save because it was obviously a bit shorter than everybody else, as we see 2, 3, and 4. I think Josh is in my ear saying that he might have heard some clunking. Maybe somebody hit a wall on their pit entry.
But it's still very close. You can see we had a beautiful view of the inside of that BMW there from the back of Justin Hall's car. But everyone, you can see the left-hand side of your screen, everyone has come into the pits right now. Griffith and Hovesen are the only ones that haven't, outside of him and Brown running at the tail end of the field. Right now, Barrera having a very quick stop. He manages to jump ahead into P2 there. Takes only a 13-second long stop, so that's a very quick stop from him. Hall, meanwhile, staying stationary for 15 seconds. So that's a very long stop from him. He had to take a lot of gas there. I think he was at the front of that train for quite some time, so he was biting through that air and having to burn up a lot more gas. So that could be the reason why he had to take a lot more fuel. But I think with all the drivers now besides Hovesen and Brown coming in, I think Hovesen needs to respond. And we've always seen Hovesen, he turns up the wick towards the end and tries to set some very fast laps before he comes into the pits. Maybe we'll see this time by. We'll have to keep our eyes out on Hovesen if he tries to push that car to its absolute limit, to set an absolute greaser of an end lap before he comes into the pits at the end of this lap. He's going through, he's about to enter this final section here, coming into the final few corners in a few moments time. We'll see if Gregory Hovesen makes that hard right turn to come into pit lane. He will be, so we're riding on board with him as he goes onto the pits. He's gonna have to keep this flawless. He has a fairly big gap to work with right now, so he needs to be careful trying to get onto that pit limiter at the absolute perfect time and try not to get held up by Brown. You can see Brown is in his box. We'll see if he exits and gets involved in this fight and possibly holds up Hovesen, so we'll have to look at the gap between him and Barrera as he's stuck in the box. You can see, there we go, there's Brown exiting, so he's not going to be involved in that fight at least for quite some time. We might see him catch up between now and the checkered flag, but we're looking at the wide shot here going into one. You can see Hovesen is already out of his box and exiting the pits well before Barrera even gets onto the start finish straight away. So Gregory Hovesen plays that strategy card to absolute perfection there, and he exits the pits with a much larger lead than he had before.
He did. It was a very, very quick stop. Obviously, like I said, he'd probably been fuel saving, at half of the first part of that race. Like, it just wasn't on main pace. Had a nice gap. The cars behind were fighting them, so that was costing them time. So just took 11.4 stop. But I did notice something when Barrera, Hendricks, and Hall came into the pits. Barrera's car went up on jacks, and I think he took a tire. And I'm going to guess it was the left front. I don't know which tire gets abused at this track, but I'm guessing because of all the high-speed left-hand turns, I'm guessing it's the left front. But that was an interesting strategy call. I don't know if it was on purpose or if it was accidental, but I definitely did see his car go up on the jacks for just a few seconds.
Yeah, and even with the car being up on jacks, he still managed to get out there fairly quickly. So that's I think that's a good theory. I can imagine it's fairly true because at a track like this with some very fast corners and a lot of heavy braking zones, I think it is very easy to lock up those tires. Even with these GT3 cars that do have a little bit of ABS, you can still lock them up if you try hard enough and have the right ABS settings right now. So the gap now between Hovesen and Barrera is about 6.7 seconds. So he extended it by about a second through the stops, but you can still see it's fairly large with this wide shot coming through the final few corners. You couldn't even see Gregory Hovesen right now. So the gap really has extended between the battle right behind them. You can see the gaps that were fairly close between Barrera, Hendricks, and Hall. You can see it's extended quite a lot. You can see the gap between Barrera and Hendricks right now. You can see that's about 2 seconds, and then about another second or so between Hendricks and Hall. So that gap has really decreased. So the battle, I think, is going to be for that final podium position between Hendricks and Hall. But you can see a nice fight here farther down the order. This is between Pern and Attrell. Attrell's trying to claw his way back through the field. He's trying to get a move done down the inside. Actually, no, my apologies. I believe that's a fight there. I believe, is that the yeah, that is Pern there. So that's Alvis and Pern. My apologies there. I thought that was Attrell getting involved. I blame my very poor and very out of date glasses prescription there. But you can see there B&M banging, going side by side, going into the hairpin. It's going to be a battle of the last late breakers, and you can see there Pern just pulling away slightly. But I think Alvis is going to try and get the switchback done. No, he can't. He actually gets on the curb a little bit and loses a little bit of time on exits. So you can see Pern has now moved up into P6. A nice move from him.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a great move. It was a drag race down that straightaway, and you're right. It was the battle of the last of the late breakers, and Pern was able to hold off Alvis on the outside and get a good exit out of that corner, prevent the switchback from happening.
Yeah, that was a very good piece of defensive driving there with these cars that are a little bit bigger. I mean, this track was originally designed for Formula One competition, and it was really the home of the German Grand Prix for quite some time. It's a little bit narrow. It's a little bit on the narrow end compared to most permanent road circuits, especially one built nowadays. So it's a little bit tight quarters with these GT3 machinery. So it's a little bit easier to defend and try and hold off those spots. Meanwhile, I think Brown is going to lap down. So Gregory Hovesen has managed to finagle his way past him. So I think Brown might get involved in the fight with Hendricks and Hall. We'll see where he is in relation to them. You can see Shane Brown going very slowly. I believe, is he already a lap down to Barrera, Hendricks, and Hall? I am not too sure if he is. So I think... I'm going to take a look at my live timing screen.
I think I see Barrera coming up behind him on the straightaway, so I think he's still in front of him.
Yeah, just barely. You can see, yep, there we go. There's Barrera right behind him. I was taking a look at my live timing screen to see exactly where they were on track. So he mentioned it there, and I think might get involved in this fight. Maybe we'll see those gaps between P2, P3, and P4 decrease as they catch up to Shane Brown. He was very responsive to letting Gregory Hovesen by us. His gap has now increased to 7.7 seconds. So I think he might try and not hurt these drivers too badly. So I think he'll try and get out of their way in due course. I think with the rate that they're catching up to him, I think they're all going to pass him towards the far end of this track by the hairpin and the back straightaway section. So I don't think it's going to cost these drivers too much time, but if they catch up to him at a really bad spot, it could be really detrimental.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you definitely want to catch him on that back straight if you can. Obviously, you don't get a chance to choose where that is, because just when you think you've got them set up properly, they'll have a twitch or something like that, and have to check up and then put you in harm's way. But so far, it looks like Barrera's doing a good job, and Brown has done a good job thus far of facilitating passes. And it looks like we are heading down that front straight. So at least it looks like for sure Barrera's going to get by on the straightaway, I believe. Now, maybe at the very end of the straight, as we see him making up that gap. The other two obviously will not. This is going to be close, though.
Yeah, I think if that lap car does get involved, I think it's going to be really good news for Hall, because he lost quite a lot of time that last lap. He was about 0.4 of a second slower than the drivers farther up the road, so none of them are going to catch up in the on the back straightaway. So we'll see where Barrera manages to get the move done. I think once they get to the tight and twistier sections, I think that'll probably be when that pace disadvantage for Brown is really put on full display here. So we'll see how these drivers negotiate, but I don't think it's going to be good news, certainly for Hendricks or Hall. I think Hall might be the one getting hurt by this the most, because I think he's going to catch him up at possibly the worst opportunity. You can see now Barrera has managed to get by, so I think this is going to really hurt Hendricks and Hall. I think Hendricks is going to get hurt badly. You can see Shane Brown there on the outside. He's going to not be able to let him by there. Okay, he let him by on the inside, so he's staying out of the way, hugging the other gravel on the outside. He's actually going to not be able to he's not going to be able to let Hall by. So Hall losing out a little bit more time. So you can see that gap is decreasing a little bit. He managed to get by him. Shane Brown managed to let all those drivers go by without incident, thankfully. But you can see that gap is still not good between Hendricks and Hall. I was expecting that to be a little bit closer, and you can see the gaps between those two is still increasing. Hendricks last lap at a 1:39.7 and Hall last lap at a 1:39.8. So that gap is increasing slowly but surely. So I think really the drivers are just trying to get to the finish. We only have 6 minutes left here, but I think the positions that you see on the left-hand side of the screen might be how they finish here.
Yeah, it's kind of what it's looking like, unless something drastic happens. All three of these drivers have done a really good job. I think as we've been watching this battle for the better part of the race, I think we've only really seen Hendricks with that one mistake. I think everybody else has been really clean thus far. And these guys have basically just pulled away from P5. Rennsport, is another 11 seconds behind Hall in P4. And then you got a nice gap between Perrin and Alvis. They're still fighting. Alvis hasn't quite let that go yet. He's still within a second of Perrin after that pass. So there's still a couple of good battles out on the track. And once again, the Hendricks Hall battle is not done yet, but it's getting time to either tighten up or let it go.
I think one driver that won't be involved in this fight, but he is closing in slowly but surely, is Simon Attrell. You can see the gap is about 4 seconds between him and Alvis. I'm taking a look at my live timing screen, and Simon last lap set a 1:39.8. Meanwhile, Alvis was at a 1:40.6. So he's slowly reeling him in about 0.8 of a second per lap here, but it's just not going to be enough with how little time there is left in this race. But I think for him to recover nicely into P8, I'm sure Simon Attrell, I can't really blame the guy if he's upset with a P8 result. But after the trouble that he ran into, dropping all the way to the basically plumb last he was running at after those issues that he had towards the start of the race, I think he'll be very happy to finish in the top 10 and escape with a P8 finish. But I think you gotta feel just so bad for the guy, because he was putting together a fantastic race. If he didn't have those technical issues, and if his shifters decided to function correctly this whole race, I think there would be no doubt that he would at least be involved in the podium fight throughout the first 10, and he might be still involved in that fight.
Yeah, absolutely. He definitely had a podium place. Not assured, but he was definitely going to be in that 3-car battle that we've been talking about. He would be the 4th car in that group, fighting over P2 and P3. So yeah, he's got, like I said, really good pace. He's doing really well. He is gaining time, but I think you're right. I don't think there's enough time. Like I said, unless somebody makes a mistake, I don't think there's enough time to just catch him on pure pace.
Yeah, I can't even say it's too little too late for him, because I think it's just he's been giving it everything all throughout this race. He was putting together very fast lap times. He's still putting together some very fast lap times. I believe, looking at my live timing screen, last time by, he was the 3rd or 4th fastest car on track. I'm just taking a look now. The only drivers that are faster than him last time by were Gregory Hoveson, Sammy Hendricks, and Justin Hall. So he is really a man on a mission at this stage. Set a 1:39.8 last time by. So we'll see what he does. And it's just, it's unfortunate, really, that his race had to go that way. But I think, fingers crossed, when the series returns in 2 weeks' time in the new calendar year, I think he can turn a new page and try and have a bit more fortune in 2024. We'll just see in 2 weeks' time when the series returns here on Apex Racing TV. That'll be on January the 10th here. We've got a lot of action coming up here on Apex that I think we'll get to in a few moments' time. But right now, Gregory Hoverson is a man on a mission. I believe he'll be taking the white flag this time by. We can follow him on the blimp view here, just putting together a storming drive now. You can see that gap is now 10 seconds between him and Justin Barrera. The gap between him and Hendricks right now is actually decreasing a little bit. It's still north of a second, and you can see the gap between Hendricks and Hall has actually decreased a little bit, but it's still a little bit spread out, these drivers are. So I think they're probably going to finish line of stern unless we have some major drama. We had it 2 weeks ago, Canadian Tire, so maybe we'll see what happens here in the final few moments of this race. It's about 2 minutes left, so I think this will definitely be the white flag for all of these drivers this coming lap here. So I think it'll be Hoverson. Unless something major happens, he'll be able to take a commanding win, but the attention will have to be towards the drivers farther behind. I can't really I think the battle between Pern and Elvis is actually spread out a little bit. You can see it's now about 8/10 of a second between those two, so it's really spread out all throughout this field. So I think all these drivers are just trying to end 2024 clean and end this race with some very clean and pristine race cars. Not a lot of contact we were expecting. I know I can't really speak for you, Charles, but I was expecting a lot of drivers to be banging doors, but we haven't really seen that in this race. We saw a little bit of drama, but fairly clean.
Yeah, really haven't. It's been really clean racing. Not a lot of door banging. And if you were looking at this, Hendricks has put his foot down. He's now up on the back of Barrera here on the last lap. He still thinks he's got a chance to get P2 out of this, and he's going for it. So he's obviously kind of dropped Hall off a bit, and so now the battle is for second.
I'm just taking a look at my live timing screen. Sammy Hendricks must have opened up some kind of nitrous bottle that he had in the roll bar, because last time by he was faster by over a second, and you can see nearly absolute disaster for the both of them going onto the brakes into the hairpin. That could have been a total disaster for the both of them, but he still closed up quite a lot. The gap between those two is still marginal. It's about a half a second between those two. So unless Sammy Hendricks can pull off an absolute miracle in the final few corners, he's certainly close enough to pull off a move, especially if Barrera makes some sort of mistake. I think these two might stay line of stern, but we'll see here. This is still pretty close. This is a very honorable drive from Sammy Hendricks to pull off so much time in the late stages of this race. It's really unbelievable. I believe last time by he was one of the fastest cars on track, so we'll see if he can get the move done here. Coming into the corner, he cannot. So I believe those two are going to stay line of stern. Meanwhile, up towards the front, Gregory Hoverson is going to take a lights of flag victory yet again from this series, leading all the laps and taking the checkered flag, his second of the season, and pulling out a commanding championship lead. His teammate who finished second last time by did not show up here, so he is going to take a very good lead in the championship. Only 2 races in, Justin Dive Bomber Barrera is going to finish in second, and then Sammy Hendricks is going to come in a brilliant third. It could have been second, maybe if he just had one more lap on him. I think he probably would have been able to get that move done. Justin Hall, meanwhile, finishes in a fairly distant fourth. Now, not the best result in the world for the driver that ended last race at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park on the podium. He'll be finishing in a distant fourth. That's Rennsport, Pern, Elvis, and Adril coming across the line. He still closed up that gap. It was about 2 seconds between him and Elvis by the time they took the checkered flag. So Adril was a man on a mission. It just wasn't enough. He probably had, if this race was an hour long, I think he probably would have been able to claw back them, but fortunately for him, those technical issues early on really cost him. So all the drivers now have taken the checkered flag, and that was a very interesting race. I think we see some donuts farther up the road, if I'm not mistaken, that or someone blew an engine after crossing the checkered flag. Yeah, there we go. There's some nice donuts there from Gregory Hoverson to cap off a commanding season, a commanding race, commanding season so far, and a commanding year here in 2023. Of all the broadcasts we've done of this series, he's won all but one of them. So really, Gregory Hoverson is a standout star, doing some donuts to celebrate a glorious way to end 2023.
Yeah, it was obviously, pretty standard race for Gregory, but yeah, the midfield battles were like I said, were very clean. But very entertaining for the entire race. There was a lot of strategy involved, and so it was. I think it was really good racing, and it's always good to get a nice clean race where we don't have nice big 3, 4, 5 car pileups during the event.
I think that is definitely a good thing after the schmozzles that we had towards the end of last race, where we had Porsches doing some very gymnastic-related moves. I'm not really sure how you could classify it. Some airborne action that happened towards the end of last race at Canadian Tire. It was nice to have a very clean race where the drivers, I don't believe anyone picked up a penalty in this race. So a lot of the drivers keeping it clean, and the clean, respectful racing that we always expect from this series certainly rang true here tonight. So the drivers are going to be pulling into the pits, peeling into the pits, and getting out of their race cars to cap off a great year of racing action from this series. We're going to get the results here in a few moments' time, but it's going to be Gregory Hoveson taking another commanding win from this season, a second win on the year. And just Gregory Hoveson, he is a man that is unstoppable, winning tonight by nearly 12 seconds, 11.975 between him and Justin Barrera to cap off this race. And Sammy Hendricks finishing in P3, rounding out your podium, only a half a second behind Barrera. So that was incredibly close between those two in the late stages of the race. If he had one more lap, I think he probably would have been able to get it done. Justin Hall finishes the race in the distant fourth. Spencer Retzma finishes in sixth, ahead of Matthew Pern. And then Bradley Alvis wasn't able to get by Pern again, so he finishes behind Pern in seventh. That Simon Adderall, the series founder, had a very up and down race, had technical issues early on. He finishes 32 seconds behind Simon Adderall, behind Gregory Hoveson. Simon Adderall finishes 32 seconds behind Gregory Hoveson in P8. That's Santinder De Hinza in ninth, had a very quiet race. He finishes about 44 seconds back. That's Chris Cassano, who was involved in some incidents. He runs out your top 10. That's Wesley Griffith in P11, had a very quiet race. I don't think we focused on him at all throughout this race. He finishes just ahead of Eric Bialotta, who did not have a quiet race. He was involved in multiple incidents and was involved in quite a lot of stuff in this race, but he still managed to bring it home in P12. A very good result from him. And then Shane Brown, the only driver a lap down, he rounds out your field in P13. So wow, that was a not the most action-packed race, I must say, but it was still very strategic stuff and very close. We had a lot of drivers running in a train, a lot of cars that you could cover with just one blanket. But that was kind of the racing action we expect to see from this series every week.
Yeah, absolutely. It was, like I said, wasn't the most action-packed, but like I said, there were still a lot of good battles, especially in the midfield, especially that for the final two podium positions. They weren't settled at any stretch. It seemed like just when you thought that somebody had it wrapped up, somebody made a move and tightened the gap up and made it more exciting. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to the next race.
And speaking of, the next race is going to be at the famous high banks of Daytona. So I'll ask you this here, Charles, right before we round off this broadcast. What do you expect from this series in 2 weeks' time at Daytona?
It's Daytona. Looking at the schedule is kind of an outlier. It is a legendary track. It is probably not the most technical track in the world, but if you like lots of drafting, lots of speed, and then the element of danger going into turn 1 and then turn 6 or 7, depending on who's counting, getting back up on the oval. Those are the danger spots, and so it's just going to be one of those that if we get the full grid back, you can almost rest assured there'll be a little catastrophe in one of those two corners. But then it's just going to be draft, and it's going to be a lot of changes positions, and but that's standard for Daytona, and it's what we look forward to.
You mentioned the point there of the draft. I think that's going to play a vital role, especially when it comes to the strategy. I'm sure a lot of these drivers are going to be fuel saving as hard as they can. We might see drivers trying to extend their first pit stop maybe till the minute 35 mark. That would be really stretching it. So we'll just see what kind of crazy strategies some of these drivers cook up in 2 weeks' time. That'll be when the series returns here on Apex Racing TV. We talked about that earlier. And we've got a whole bunch of racing action coming up here on Apex. We've got the Radical Esports Cup. That'll be coming up here on Friday, December the 29th. That'll be at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. That'll be at Laguna Seca. That's going to be an interesting race. We've got the IRA Porsche Cup coming back here on the 2nd, and we also have the ARL Prototype Championship. That'll be returning here to Apex Racing TV. That'll be on this upcoming Thursday. That'll be on Thursday, January the 4th, when that series returns here on Apex. That was some really good racing throughout last season, so we'll just have to wait and see what that series can bring. But when it comes to this series, this season is far from from over. We're only a third of the way through Season 3. However, tonight caps off a year of great racing from the S1 series. I've had the pleasure to be here since the beginning of the series here on Apex, all the way back in early September, and I'm happy to be with you from the start of next year as well. We'll see you all again in 2024, specifically January 10th, 2024, at 9:10 Eastern, 6:10 Pacific, when we come to you from the virtual high banks of Daytona. We've got much more coming up here on Apex. As I said, the Radical Esports Cup every Friday here at 4 p.m., the Ray Esports Racing League and the IRA Porsche Cup completing our Super Tuesday coverage here on Apex, and even some special events like the Racing Lab Christmas special event that'll be coming here on Apex tomorrow, December 28th at 2 p.m. Eastern. Charles and I, along with our producer Josh, will all be doing that together, and if you have the time, I'd recommend tuning in. That'll be MX5 Cup Cars at Rudskogan. That'll be a very interesting race. I'm sure it'll be action-packed from start to finish. If you'd like to stay up to speed on all the broadcasts and everything we have coming up here on Apex Racing TV, you can hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss a thing. Our congratulations go out to your winner tonight, Gregory Hovesen, taking a dominant win here in Germany, continuing his dominant streak of this race, winning now 7 of the 8 broadcasts that we've done from this series here on Apex Racing TV. Our thanks as always go out to Dr. Dabber and Zine, the proud partners of this series. Without them, these broadcasts would not be possible, and this broadcast wouldn't have been nearly as good if it weren't for our awesome producer Josh Wilkie, working on the cameras and showing all the graphics, and my colleague Charles Bichelle joining us for this whole season here from the S1 Racing Series. We've still got plenty of blanks to fill, many laps to be turned, and 4 more races to be run this season. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time for the 3rd round of the season, and I hope to see you all there. So for myself, Ron Mullins, Charles Bichelle joining me in the commentary booth, and Josh Wilkie working on the cameras in the virtual production hauler, I say thank you all so very much for watching. Have a very happy new year. Don't worry, I won't forget that. And a great rest of your night.
Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use